welcome to our next guest. Ben Kinch is the general manager for WRIU Radio, broadcasting from the University of Rhode Island in Kingston, RI. But he's not in Rhode Island today. The URI men's basketball team is in the Atlantic 10 tournament, and Ben is giving us a preview of what we can all expect. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on the show. Love being out here in D.C., our nation's capital, representing WRIU and the Rhode Island Rams. It's going to be a lot of fun this weekend.
All right, Ben. Yeah, we're looking forward. The big game is tomorrow, tip-off at noon, right?
Yep, correct. 12
right.
o'clock.
So the Rhode Island Rams are playing the VCU Rams. What can we all expect from this game tomorrow?
Well, I would expect Rhode Island, first of all, they're coming off of a pretty tough week. They lost big time versus St. Joe's on senior night. Lost by 30 points. Worst loss for this team since 2013. Then you go on the road, you lose to Davidson by 2 points. So you're coming into the A10 tournament limping as the regular season champions. You know, you're the one seed, but right now they're really not looking that way. I would expect this team, however, despite all that, it's an angry team. This is a team that knows it can perform better than the way it did perform. So you can expect them to come in focused, angry. I know a bunch of the players feel like they were snubbed in some of these postseason awards. Stan Robinson's a great example of that. There was plenty of writers, fans, coaches alike who thought that Stan Robinson should have won the Defensive Player of the Year award over Yuta Watanabe. So these guys are playing with a chip on their shoulder. They should play angry, focused, and play like the team that I think everyone knows that they are. Because this is a team that not only has been dominant in the A10, but could make a deep tournament run if they get everything together.
Yeah, I think the big question here is if they get everything together. So URI is the number 1 seed in this tournament. They're playing number 8 VCU. Let's talk a little bit about the last matchup that the teams played. URI beat VCU by about 13 points. Should fans really read into that, especially since URI is a little bumped up and bruised up after those last 2 big losses?
So it's tough to look into that game only because, like you said, you know, both teams have been trending almost in different ways with Rhode Island and their momentum slump, and VCU obviously has all their momentum with a nice win over Dayton. That last game was interesting because it was the emergence of Cyril Langevin this season. Langevin was a really big presence in the paint last season, and he kind of fell off at the beginning of the season. But boy, what a game did he have versus VCU. He had a double-double, 18 rebounds, far, clearing everybody else out on the board. So that was an interesting game for Rhode Island, especially because when VCU first came into the Atlantic 10 and they started playing each other every single season, VCU absolutely, it was totally one-sided, those games. Rhode Island only won a couple of those games. And now in the past season and a half, Rhode Island is 3-0 versus VCU. They hope to go 4-0, not to mention in the Atlantic 10 championship game. So this is something else that's a lot of fun. Is it's a rematch from the Atlantic 10 championship game last year. But in terms of should there be too much to look for in that last one as opposed to this one, so much has happened since February the 2nd. So anything that you thought about that game, I would probably throw that out the window.
Probably some good strategic advice there from you, Ben. You run the play-by-play as well for the radio station, so I think that's good advice for URI fans out there. Don't look too much into it. All right, so there's been some buzz around Coach Dan Hurley. GoLocal just put up a story, if you're interested, on golocalprov.com. Hurley being named as one of the favorites for the Pitt job, multiple sources naming him in contention since he's had such a good track record at URI. Is there any talk of this, any buzz, and what are your thoughts on this?
So there's always going to be murmurs when you have a high-profile coach like Dan Hurley who came into a program like URI that was struggling before he got there and absolutely did a complete 180 and turned this program into a nationally relevant team. So when you have a coach of that high-profile status, anytime there's a big-name job opening up, automatically his name is going to be linked to it. In terms of rumor, there's always going to be rumors. You hear it's all hearsay. The only person who really knows what's going on in Dan Hurley's mind is Dan Hurley. He's a guy that likes to keep his cards close to his chest. So I think that the only time we're ever really going to know what he chooses is when he makes that decision public and official himself. In terms of what I think about Dan Hurley, what I know of Dan Hurley is he's a competitor. He's a person that loves to compete at a high level, and he likes to win. Dan Hurley likes to win. That's the family. His father loved to win in high school. His brother Bobby Hurley loves winning out in Arizona. He wants to be at a place where he's going to succeed, and at least to me, that place is the University of Rhode Island. He has set himself up for future success in the Atlantic 10. He's got a top recruiting class coming in, the best recruiting class in the mid-majors next season, highlighted by a 4-star big man, Jermaine Harris, who chose URI over Xavier, which is pretty big. I mean, you think about Xavier, they've been ranked as high as 3 this season. So when you have players choosing University of Rhode Island over Xavier, that speaks a lot to the coach himself. So he has himself set up for success going forward. I don't believe that he wants to go to a place, for example, like Pitt or some of the other jobs that are opening up in Power 5 conferences in the ACC, where he's just going to be fighting to, at best, finish in the middle of the pack, because it's very tough to overcome these teams like Duke, like Louisville, like Virginia. So to me, my opinion is Dan Hurley is a competitor. He wants to win, and he has the best shot to do that for years to come at the University of Rhode Island.
There you go. I know you did just get in today, so glad that you made it to DC despite the weather and many flight cancellations and delays. Have you been out and about, and has anybody been talking about these swirled around rumors or any buzz about Dan Hurley leaving? Anybody talking about it? I'm sure a lot of sports reporters down there.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of Rhode Island fans, actually. A lot of fans on the flight, a lot of fans on the train from Baltimore right in here to D.C. And, of course, when you see a fellow Rhode Island fan, you got to talk some Rhode Island sports. And when you do, it's almost the topic of Dan Hurley is almost the first one that comes up. And I think the consensus is the same opinion that I share. A lot of Rhode Island fans believe that Dan Hurley, we've seen him through these past couple seasons. We've seen what he can do to this program. We've seen what he means to this program, and vice versa. The program means a lot to him. It's a two-way street, and these fans recognize and respect that. So I believe the consensus is everyone believes that Dan Hurley wants to keep that winning ways going with Rhode Island, and people think he's going to stick around here for a long time. That being said, it's not going to be easy sleeping when more of these jobs start to open up. People are definitely going to be a little concerned, because there's definitely a money factor out there. There's a lot of other schools that can offer Dan Hurley a lot more money than the University of Rhode Island can, but I've always been a believer that Dan Hurley is not a money-first guy. Definitely
a lot of money out on the table for you. When stories like this come up, potential offerings, people's names get tossed into the rink on potential job offerings coming up and coaching positions open up, can these kind of stories make an impact on players' mindset going into big games?
Yeah, absolutely. It can have that kind of effect. You don't want to look too forward into next season, because you have to focus on the games you're playing right now, especially this Rhode Island team. Like I mentioned earlier, they can't lose focus. They can't come out and play like they did versus St. Joe's. They can't go out and shoot 3 of 28. They're going to get an early bounce. They're going to get a bad seed. Right now, if Rhode Island was to lose tomorrow, they're probably an 8 seed. That puts you, if you win that first matchup against a number 1 seed, as good as this Rhode Island team is, that's going to be a hard matchup for them to win. So you got to focus. You have to you got to try to win this championship if you want that preferable seeding. I think they could push to as high as a 6 seed with an Atlantic 10 championship victory, but that obviously depends on what these other conferences do. But in terms of what talks about the coaches can do, like I said, obviously Dan Hurley is the only one who really knows what's going on, but I like to believe that the players have some insight into what he's thinking, or at least his mood, or the way he's trending. So I have a feeling that they have an idea of what he's going to do, whether that's set in stone or not. I think they have some kind of idea. And they've probably known that for a while. So I don't think that has a major impact on their mindsets going into these games. And from what I know from these guys, especially the team this season, the chemistry, the bond, these are guys that are able to eliminate that outside noise. They have that ability to focus in on a game when they need to, turn it on in the second half. It's really been a second half team all year long. When they've gotten into these close struggles with teams like Bonaventure at home or Dayton in that second half at home where they destroyed them, they know how to focus in and turn it on. So I would expect them to do that and eliminate all that Dan Hurley buzz outside of the court.
All right, Ben. So it looks like we are looking for maybe a second half game tomorrow. These guys are going to tune out the noise, whatever that noise may be. Expectations for tomorrow, what do you think when it comes down to that last few seconds?
I think it's going to be a game that you're going to see a lot of rebounds. You're going to see a hard, slug them out, defensive game. That's how these last couple of games between these two schools have usually gone. Both teams prioritize defense, on-ball defense, and boxing out post presence. That's what these teams really, really like to look forward to. You got great big men going at each other. You saw it once earlier in the season, but you're going to see Justin Tillman for VCU, and you're going to see Cyril Langevin going at it. That's going to be one of the best matchups you're not only going to see in the A-10 championship and in the tournament, but that's going to be one of the best matchups you see in March, because those are two young guys who are fantastic at the positions that they play. So expect to see a lot of defense. And then look for E.C. Matthews and Jared Terrell, the two seniors for Rhode Island. They've been struggling these last couple of games. They haven't really been able to flip the switch when they needed to in either that St. Joe's or the Davidson game. So I would definitely be on the lookout for either of them. And Jonathan Williams for VCU, besides Justin Tillman, would be my player to watch, because he's a player that has experience in the Atlantic 10 Championship tournament. He was on that team last year that came runner-up. So this VCU team is a team that has experience, and a couple of those players, like I mentioned, should bring that in. But you got to also look at the coaching. Mike Rhodes, who took over for Will Wade for VCU this year, it's his first year as the head coach for VCU after Will Wade left for LSU. What's he going to be like when the spotlight is on him in this postseason tournament? We don't know. But I would expect Dan Hurley to have the edge there, because he is a championship coach and he has been under that kind of pressure before. So I would give the coaching edge to Rhode Island. That's going to play a major key.
Ben Kinch, General Manager at WRIU. He also does the play-by-play for the University of Rhode Island men's basketball team. I think a lot of people are going to be distracted streaming on their cell phones tomorrow, or trying to be pushed up against a TV to watch this game tomorrow. So we really appreciate it. Enjoy the game tomorrow. We really appreciate you chatting with us, making the time for it today. Have fun when you're there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, Ben, thanks so much. We're wrapping up here in the GoLocal Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. Thanks, and we will.